Hi, you guys. My name is Stephanie, and welcome to the next installment of my expatriation training program. And thank you guys for joining me today. So I'm going to start off with a quick recap of what we learned at the last presentation. And we talked briefly about what an expatriate is. So can anyone tell me what an expatriate is?
It's like when you get sent to another country for work. And usually if you have family, they get to go with you.
Great, yeah, so that's right. So an expatriate is someone who is residing in another country or culture, whether that's temporarily or on a more permanent basis as a result of a career assignment. This is something you might hear a lot about if you're working in the human resources department of an international or multinational firm, but generally speaking, you're probably not going to hear a lot more about expatriation otherwise. So we talked about the fact that expatriation assignments can have pretty high failure rates as a result of poor planning. So in a new culture, you not only have entirely different cultural norms, but there is a potential for all kinds of new languages that you maybe haven't been exposed to in the past. Cultural norms tell people in that culture what is generally socially acceptable. So for instance, I'm sure you may have heard that in a lot of places in Europe, it's common practice to kiss each other on the cheek when greeting each other. Likewise, in a lot of places in international business, business people are expected to make pleasantries for a specified amount of time before actually talking about business matters. So you might be able to imagine what could happen if you don't know the cultural norms of your work environment. This also applies to your social or personal lives as well. We touched pretty briefly on benefits expatriates can receive, and these are things like better salaries than that of the home location, living allowances, and paid childcare. I gave some pretty brief statistics which just really reinforced that expatriate programs fail, generally speaking, due to the inability for an employee or his or her family to adapt. I also touched on a few places that are higher ranking in terms of expatriate stays, and these are rated on things like cost of living, personal finance, and quality of life. And Ecuador and Mexico were the two main places that I talked about in the last presentation. So you guys put yourself in this situation. Think about if you were assigned to a new job in a country or culture that is completely alien to you. How do you see yourself responding in a situation like this, and how do you think it would impact your work and personal life?
I feel like it would maybe be a hard adjustment for me to make just because I'm leaving somewhere that I know really well. I'm leaving my friends, and I just feel like it would be a huge culture shock for me and my family. The language barrier, maybe my family doesn't adjust very well, which makes me feel kind of like it's my fault for moving them.
Definitely.
And yeah, I just feel like it could be difficult, just the simple everyday things like food and just how everything's different.
Yeah, those are all things that a lot of people have issues with when on an expatriate assignment. So personal life would be impacted, I think, first and foremost, and I think this is probably true for everyone. But without proper training to get you kind of over that hump, your professional life is probably going to be negatively impacted as well. And this is where a solid expatriation policy comes into play. So with that in mind, I am going to go over a few of the best practices for ensuring that a good expatriate program and policy is in place for your organization. So the first practice, according to worldatwork.org, is in understanding that very few employees' opinions on expatriation are actually swayed by international events. So while it's probably true that most employees would be opposed to expatriating to a high-risk area, the general consensus in this study found that employees would feel secure in knowing that there is a good hazard management plan in place by their employer. Another best practice is making sure that you're understanding the motivations of your employees and their reasons for accepting these assignments in the first place. So in the last presentation, I discussed one of the benefits of expatriation as having a potential for a higher salary than you generally would when you're doing the same work in your home country. While this is really nice, designers of this program really need to realize and understand that statistically speaking, most of the people that accept these assignments don't accept them for the benefits. Many employees actually accept these expatriate assignments for the career growth opportunities that it can provide to them. A best practice that I think is pretty standard is finding those employees who have successfully completed an assignment and doing kind of an exit interview. So really digging into what they did well, how they felt about the experience, what they feel the employer did well for the expatriate, and what the employer can do better in the future. Other ways of utilizing these successful employees are by sending them on other expatriate assignments in the future, as well as using them as mentors for first-time assignees. And I don't know about you guys, but I think I would feel a lot more at ease having the guidance of somebody who has kind of successfully completed one of these assignments in the past. Another best practice is for firms to recognize the importance of family. So we discussed the number one cause of assignment failures, and this is employee and or family failure to adapt to a new culture. There are expatriate and family programs set in place by many employers to help everyone involved kind of gain a better understanding of the culture that they're going to be immersed into soon. The things such as values, cultural norms, business culture, and just general day-to-day life are taught in these training programs. Once the expatriate and family have moved and settled into the assignment country, successful businesses a lot of times provide in-country coaching to further help these expatriates and their families and kind of observe and help observe them along the way. The fifth best practice is to consider the overall potential for happiness of all expatriates. This ties into things like cost of living and quality of life, which I talked briefly about in the last presentation. And according to worldatwork.org's study, traditional long-term and short-term expatriates have a higher quality of life compared to international commuters and those on extended business travel. So reasons for this are associated with extended hotel stays as opposed to those expatriates who are actually establishing homes in these host countries. The next best practice is pretty important, and this is to improve international human resource employee assistance. So we're talking about in the home country as well as in the host country for these expatriates. And this is actually a really big opportunity that a lot of firms still manage to miss out on. Worldatwork.org's study has found that assignees speak to management, families, and peer groups before they actually speak to human resources on these assignment-related issues. Even though human resources is the department that organizes and kind of puts together these programs, and they are the ones who should have all of these resources available to them. So, of course, each expatriate program is going to vary and be very different. But utilizing some of these important best practices is hopefully going to allow for these firms to see success in the future and lower expatriate failure rates. So these are some of the most important best practices. As I said, does anyone have any questions for me right now?
Would you take a trip?
You know, I think I would, but I think that I would have to have one of these, like a solid expatriate program in place.
Yeah, I feel like that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think it would really be helpful. Otherwise, adaptability is really hard when you're in a completely different place. So that's why these programs are set in place.
Do you know if there are certain careers or fields that have higher rates of expatriation?
I don't off the top of my head, but that's something that I can definitely research for the next presentation. So at the next and final training session, I'll be getting even further into what makes a successful expatriation program. And then we might be doing an activity, so you guys have that to look forward to. So thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.